Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight with Scientists in School. I'm your host, Betty Bacopoulos, and today I'm so excited to be joined by Dr. Tanya Harrison. Dr. Harrison is a planetary scientist, and most recently, she was involved with the landing of Perseverance rover on Mars. Dr. Harrison calls herself a professional Martian, and she says it is possible in her lifetime that we will be visiting the red planet. Let's head on over and meet Dr. Harrison, who joins us today from Washington. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight with Scientists in School. Today, I am joined by planetary scientist, Dr. Tanya Harrison. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is so exciting. I can't wait to dive into how a young girl becomes a planetary scientist. So start at the beginning and tell me about your love affair with Mars. How did that happen?
I've been interested in space for about as long as I can remember. I grew up watching a lot of Star Trek with my parents, but even before that, I watched a movie with Big Bird from Sesame Street in it called Big Bird in Japan, where he meets the mythological Japanese princess of the moon called Kaguya Hime. And for some reason, that really stuck with me. And I would go outside every night and stare at the moon, and I was just obsessed. But it wasn't until the Pathfinder mission landed on Mars in 1997 that my interest went from general space to Mars specifically, because NASA sent their first ever rover to another planet, which was a rover onboard Pathfinder called Sojourner. I actually keep a model of it on my desk. This
Oh,
is not
cool.
actual size,
Of
but
course.
it was about the size of a microwave oven in real life. And Pathfinder took a series of images of Sojourner as it was driving off of the Pathfinder lander onto the surface of Mars. And NASA released this as a little animated GIF, and I thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I knew at that moment, I was 11, I really wanted to work on Mars rovers.
So you were hooked from that young age. Wow. Did you have role models that supported this passion as you were growing up?
Yeah. So a couple years later, NASA had this project called the Mars Millennium Project, where they challenged students all around the world to design a base on Mars in the year 2030. And I threw myself into this. I didn't do it as part of school. I was just having fun on my own. But one of the resources they had listed on their website was that you could reach out to your local chapter of a group called the Mars Society. And I lived in an area that was full of aerospace companies. And
Mm.
so a lot of people in the Mars Society worked for places like Boeing or other companies like that that had things to do with space. So I just showed up at one of their meetings one day at the local library, and I was, I think, 13 at that point, and everybody else there was, an adult. And they were really excited to have like this young
Yeah.
kid come in who was super excited to learn everything about space. I'm like, what do I need to do to get a job in the industry? Like, what should I study? And they were super helpful. They set me up with job shadowing opportunities. They gave me opportunities where I got to meet professors at the local university. They actually paid for me to go to Toronto to give a talk at a conference there, which was the first time I'd ever been to Toronto. Um, and I still keep in touch with a lot of those people to this day, even 20 plus years later, which is really cool. They're like my surrogate space parents.
That's such a great message, though, about just going out there and doing it. Like, just like you said, you were a young kid. There were all these adults there, but you just kind of went for it, didn't you?
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the motto of my life, is like I see something I want to do and then I don't like ask for permission. I just kind of do it and see what happens.
Now, I know that I have a lot of young kids watching today, and they're going to want to know, what is a day in the life of a planetary scientist like?
So at least for me, when I was working on missions, you would come in first thing in the morning and you would get to look at all the data that came back from the rovers or the satellites the day before. And that's honestly the coolest part of the job, at least to
Mm.
me. We send commands for the rovers every day, and then we get stuff back every day. For the satellites, we do things once every week or two, but the data still trickles back every day. So you get to see all the pictures that we took of Mars. Um, and then I would go through them and analyze them from the standpoint of a geologist, planetary
Mm.
scientist. So planetary science is just a geologist that looks at other planets more than
Okay.
we look at Earth.
Right.
Um, to see if there's anything important in that image to teach us about the history of Mars, and also from an engineering standpoint. So, are the cameras functioning the way they should? Was there anything about maybe the time of day we took this image or the time of year we took the image that would tell us we want to take it again or try
Mhm.
a different time? Maybe the weather was bad and we need to shoot it again because there were clouds in the way, because Mars does have clouds,
Ah,
things like that. And then
now,
some of it is just doing research. So,
right, sure.
actually figuring out what's going on Mars.
Now you were part of, I think, is it 3 rovers?
Opportunity, Curiosity, and Perseverance.
Perseverance, right? So describe to me the day. What were you doing? Were you watching the landing of Perseverance rover? Just describe that day for me. What was it like?
That was really exciting. So by the time Perseverance had landed, I wasn't working on the mission anymore. I was working on cameras and helping pick landing sites before the rover. I think before it even launched at that point.
Hmm.
But getting to see something land on Mars that you worked on is a really cool feeling. And getting the video back that we had of landing, we've never done that anywhere in the solar system, like pretty much not even on Earth, except for maybe those videos that SpaceX takes when they land their boosters. So it was pretty much the coolest thing we've ever done on Mars.
I bet that would have been just so exciting. Now, there's a classroom. I'm sure there's lots of classes, but I happen to know that there is a classroom in Guelph, Ontario, not far from Toronto. You've been to Toronto. The school is called Rixon Ridge, and they have followed everything to do with Perseverance rover. And so they have sent along a few questions. I hope you're okay if we have students ask you a few questions about Perseverance rover. Are you game?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's hear our first question.
I'm in grade 2 and there's no air on Mars, so how does Ingenuity helicopter fly?
So there is some air on Mars. There's not enough for a human to walk around and breathe without a spacesuit on, but there is an atmosphere that's about like 1% of what we have on Earth. And that made it really tricky to actually design the Ingenuity helicopter. We had to give it really big rotors, basically wings, compared to what you would need to fly a similarly sized drone on the Earth. So it weighs about 2 kilograms, and then the wingspan is a couple of meters, I think, all the way across so that it can actually fly in that thin atmosphere.
Okay, next question.
I'm in grade 2 and I was wondering, how is the Mars rover gonna come back?
So this rover is not going to come back. We've actually never brought anything back from Mars, but we are going to bring samples back that Perseverance is collecting probably in the late 2020s. There's a European rover called the Fetch rover that's going to go and pick up all those samples and deliver them to basically a tiny rocket on the surface that will take it to something in orbit of Mars that will then send them back to Earth. But we're still designing how to do that since we've never done it before.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
that is like so amazing to think about, that something is now going to come back from Mars. That's incredible. Okay, next question.
I am in grade 2. My question is, how are we going to grow food on Mars?
That's a really important question. We've been testing some of that on the space station using techniques called aeroponics and hydroponics, which is basically growing food with either only air or only water, or maybe a little bit of dirt that you've brought up there with you. But the dirt on Mars doesn't have all of the right ingredients that we need to grow stuff to be really healthy like it would here on Earth. So we'd probably have to add a lot of stuff to it to make it able to grow food, or we'll have to keep doing more things like these, growing things in air or growing things in little bits of water, because there is enough oxygen and enough water on Mars that we can use stuff like that.
Okay, I'm fascinated by these answers myself. Okay, last question for the next student.
Hi, I'm in grade 2. I am wondering, why did the water on Mars disappear?
So that's one of the big mysteries of Mars. We think what happened is early on, maybe 3.5 or 4 billion years ago, Mars was a lot like Earth. It had rivers and lakes and a thick atmosphere, and it was warm. And then over time, since the planet is smaller than Earth, it cooled off more quickly, and the core inside of it solidified. So the core on Earth is still liquid, and it generates our magnetic fields. And that's what causes things like the Northern Lights, if you've ever seen those before. But on Mars, it doesn't have any magnetic field left. And the magnetic field is what protects us from the solar wind. So all of these particles that are shooting out of the sun all the time. And on Mars, that's actually causing the atmosphere to be stripped away into space. So what we think happened is over the course of many hundreds of millions of years, as the atmosphere blew away, all of the water either got lost into space or it went down into the rocks, and now it's locked up there in ice or in minerals that have water locked up in them.
Wow, okay, there you go, Rixon Ridge students. There's the answers from Dr. Tanya Harrison. Thank you for sending those in. Tanya, you call yourself a professional Martian. When I read that, I thought that was the moment when I said I have to reach out to you and interview you. I think that's an amazing title. Do you think really, as everyday people in our lifetime, will be going to Mars?
Certainly hope so. I think the plan right now is like SpaceX really wants to go to Mars by 2030. NASA wants to send humans to Mars in the early 2030s. So folks like kind of in your grade level might be the right age to
Wow.
be some of the first astronauts that go to Mars.
Wow, that's so unbelievable. I can't believe that's the answer to that question. That's fascinating and like it's a bit mind-blowing. Now, I've heard you talk do a TED talk, and you said you don't have to work for NASA to get a sense of wonder exploring our planets, the comets, and space. What can young kids do that want to get involved?
There's a lot of projects out there through a thing called Zooniverse, where you can go and actually participate in what we call citizen science projects. You can help scientists identify things in pictures. Some of it is marking different types of galaxies. Some of it is stuff that's not even related to space, like counting penguins, or helping to identify boats in images so that we can train computers to recognize these things. And it's not a really difficult task at the end of the day. It's just really time consuming. So it's really helpful to scientists to have other people help us label all of this stuff. But you can also just, if you want to see, say, the images that are coming back from the rovers, you can go to the websites for any of the missions on the NASA website and look at the images at the same time as the scientists. They come back every single day. And so you can look at them and see what you think is happening in the images. You can make pretty figures with them. You can make little mosaics. You can try to make color versions. Like you could try to investigate Mars on your own, because looking at the pictures honestly is the same thing that I would be doing as a scientist. I look at the pictures and try to figure out from that what I see on Mars.
Now, talking about those photos, I've heard you say that that's one of the best parts of the job. When you come and look at some of those photographs that you're taking of Mars, you're the first person to see an image of that planet before anybody else in the world.
In a lot of cases, yeah. And that even to this day, that's a really surreal feeling. Like to think that no one else has seen this piece of Mars before. It's kind of undescribable. It's exactly what I would have dreamed of when 11-year-old me was watching Sojourner drive around on Mars.
Yeah, it's incredible that you're seeing a part of a planet so far away before anybody else. Now, were you also always in love with photography? Do you do this as a hobby or professionally?
Yeah, I remember in grade 2, there was, we had done one of those book sale contests in our class, and I got enough points to pick a prize out of a box. And the prize that I picked was a bright orange film camera. That should have been a clue that I liked Mars, I guess. And after that, I got kind of obsessed. I didn't really have access to a lot of cameras because, film was expensive and we didn't really have a lot of resources for me to do that. But when I got older, when I was 18, I actually won some money on a game show. And so I went out and I bought my first digital camera when digital cameras were still kind of new.
Right.
And that kind of re-sparked my love. And in the last 10 years or so, I've been working as a professional photographer of Earth as well as Mars. So I like to say that I'm a photographer of 2 planets.
That's amazing. That's so great. I find that so amazing to be able to combine 2 passions. You've been able to take your love of photography and your love of planets and just make it into, I'm sure, what is a very rewarding career, being able to combine both of them together, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're totally transferable skills.
Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I also read your one of your most recent blog posts, and it is called "My Disability Does Define Me." And it says that at the age of 14, you were diagnosed with AS, ankylosing spondylitis. And in that blog, you were so candid and so honest about having a disability in STEM. Tell us a little bit about that.
It certainly causes problems. It's really frustrating. And I started to get sick when I was about maybe 11 or 12 or so. And it took a little while to figure out what the diagnosis actually was. And especially studying geology to get into planetary science. Geology is a very physical field. You have to go out, you go on field trips, you hike around, you dig holes in the dirt, you climb up mountains. And a lot of it was stuff that I couldn't do. So I felt like I wasn't getting the full experience of what it was like to be a geologist. And the places that I was at in terms of where I was going to school weren't really great in making accommodations for that disability until I got to the level of a PhD. And then it was a lot better. But by that point, I was also old enough that I had gotten a little better at kind of managing what I could and couldn't do and recognizing how to not push myself too hard to the point where I wouldn't be functional later. But that's kind of I think that happens in general anyway. Like if it's not something that you've had your whole life, like it took me time to adapt to it. And once I made those adaptations and figured out how I could still achieve my dreams and work in science while working around this other thing, being AS, then I was able to still achieve the goals that I had initially. It certainly was more difficult because of the AS, but I was still able to do it. The universal healthcare was honestly a huge reason that I had decided to immigrate to Canada, because having a disability in the US was extremely expensive.
Right.
Um, and it honestly changed my life moving to Canada. And I wanted to immigrate there for a long time. My family had immigrated from the UK to the US via Canada.
Oh,
And we
okay.
went up to Vancouver a lot because we were living in Seattle. And I just always felt at home there. And so as soon as I had the opportunity, I moved back. And then as soon as I had been in Canada long enough, I applied for permanent residency.
Excellent. And now you're living in Washington.
Yeah, now until COVID, I was splitting my time between like Toronto and Phoenix, and then I got a job in Washington, DC, and then COVID hit. So when COVID goes away, hopefully now I'll be able to split my time between DC and Toronto, which is a much shorter flight.
Yes. Now you describe yourself as an avid photographer, which makes sense, but I'm really intrigued as to what a public transit enthusiast means.
This actually ties to my original trip to Toronto to give a talk about Mars when I was 13 or 14 years old, thanks to the Mars Society. I had never really lived anywhere that had a subway before. And so I rode on the subway in Toronto, and I thought it was really cool. So when I moved back to Toronto, I just had the idea one day that I wanted to visit all of the subway stations. And so I made it my mission. I would go out really early Sunday mornings when there was no one there, so I could go to each one and photograph all the stations and their signs and stuff, and then just keep going. And then it just kind of grew from there. Like anytime I would travel somewhere, I'd want to ride on their train or their subway or something like that just to check it out.
Have you been anywhere else in the world where you've loved their public transit system?
London subway is really cool.
Yes.
Paris and Glasgow actually has a tiny little subway that goes around in a little circle. So it's kind of adorable,
Okay.
even though it's not all that functional.
Yeah. I haven't been to the Glasgow one, but Paris I found unbelievable. The map system looks daunting, and yet it is crazy. You can get from one end to the other in no time. Now, you also call yourself a chronic creative. Do you have a site on Etsy?
I do, yes.
So what kind of stuff are you doing there creatively?
One of it is for, I guess I have two. One is for photography and one is for the Toronto subway stuff. So I actually made a whole company of like Toronto subway swag, where I've taken the photos that I took of all of the subway station signs and printed them on things. And then I have a separate store that's not on Etsy where I make like space t-shirts and stuff. And it's not really, none of it's really in the intent of like making money, because some of the stuff it's like, oh, maybe 5 people will ever buy this t-shirt because it's so specifically space nerdy. But I just like to make it and put it out there and see like, oh, if one person decides they want to wear this shirt because they like space, that makes me happy. And I'll make like $4, but that's not really what it's about.
Right. So my last question before I let you go is, if you discovered a comet or a planet, have you ever thought of what you would name it?
Ooh. Well, comets, they usually name after whoever discovers them. So you have comets like Shoemaker-Levy or Comet Hale-Bopp. So if I found one, it would be Comet Harrison, which is kind of cool. A lot of comets are actually discovered by amateur astronomers. So just people that own telescopes and they are really avidly watching the sky and they suddenly notice a fuzzy dot that wasn't there before. So it's not usually professional astronomers. So anybody can discover a comet. You can also get asteroids named after you. If you do something that makes you kind of big in the space field, people can decide to name an asteroid after you. And then planets tend to be named, unfortunately, very boring things like numbers after the name of the star, like Gliese 847b or something. But maybe someday we'll get to name them things like in Star Trek. So there'll be Vulcan and Andor and Beta Z and stuff like that.
I was just going to ask you to settle the debate. Are you Star Trek or Star Wars fan?
Oh, totally Star Trek.
Okay. That's a debate.
You can't see, I have Star Trek earrings on right now, and like my ring is Star Trek.
My husband, I have to watch all the Star Trek shows. I've seen them all too. So Vulcan would be a cool planet name. Thanks so much, Dr. Harrison. This has been fantastic. You are very inspiring. I'm sure there are kids everywhere that aspire to grow up and be a planetary scientist. And food for thought, right? We're going to Mars. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy and exciting. Thanks so much for doing this. Take care and all the best.
No problem. Thanks, everybody.